What's going on, guys? My name is Julian Young. I am the host of the Blockchain Brief, where every episode we are interviewing innovators and founders in the blockchain and crypto space. Today, I'm extremely excited to have Richard Yang, the co-founder of Cocos BCX, with me today. Richard, it's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Julian.
So, Richard, let's kick things off. Tell me a little bit about your background, your co-founder's background, and how did you get into the space?
Yeah, so I spent 7 years in internet entertainment and gaming, and also another 7 years on investment-related stuff, mostly researching the microeconomics. So my partner, Haozhi Chen, he's a co-founder of Chukong Technology. He's also a very known serial entrepreneur in China. So what he did for years was that their company sponsored the open source project Cocos 2DX and Cocos 3D, which has 1.2 million developers worldwide. And also, they have spent 8 years supporting the global developers to make good games. So we're trying to inherit that experience onto blockchain world. Basically, we're building a full stack platform, including a blockchain, a software engine, and also an IDE to help the developers to easily develop games on decentralized infrastructures.
Fantastic. So before we jump into Cocos BCX, I really want to hear a little bit more about Cocos, the original sort of company, right? And I would love to have you really kind of dive into detail about how that platform works. And I think you should also talk about the multitude of different games that have been built on that platform, because I think you guys have some very, very exciting ones there that everybody that's watching should recognize.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julian. So Cocos has been more than a software engine. It is more like an ecosystem for gaming. So developers can use very friendly languages such as Lua and JS to easily develop their applications on different devices and platforms. So that's critical to game developers so they can get their content up to date and on time. So right now, other than the software engine, Cocos 2DX also have a lot of add-ons and premium services. For example, the ad network integration, the data analysis. So some of the famous games developed by Cocos 2DX and 3D include some of the series of Angry Birds, Clash of Kings or Clash of Clans. Yep. So also even today, like some of the top games on the gross like topping lists of App Store in Japan, Korea, Asia, India, they were still made from like Cocos. So that's briefly the history and some background of the Cocos 2DX and 3D project.
Fantastic. And so I guess the next question is, why incorporate gaming into blockchain, right? If you have something that's already extremely successful, what's the big problem that you guys are trying to solve here and utilizing blockchain to sort of solve that issue?
Well, that's a very awesome question and is commonly overlooked because usually when we go into blockchain gaming, the first question is, would blockchain games make sense? To us, we think there are a lot of economic sides in every game, and some of them, they integrate with blockchain mechanism perfectly. For example, card games, collectibles, simulation numbers. So they actually gave the players a lot of entertainment experience. So that's why we try to build some tools using similar idea, what we did for graphic user interface to help developers actually develop their applications based on new economics.
Interesting. So let's talk about some of those new economics, right? What are some things that, because there's blockchain implementation, that allows you to accomplish without blockchain implementation?
Well, so in the old days, we pay for service. For example, I paid $5 for some virtual blade in a game. But for some of the games, that digital experience can last. World of Warcraft is a very good example. That game has been lasting for years, and some of the items are worth more than the original cost, how we got it. So we think there are a lot of the games that may apply to this principle as well. There are so many real-world examples. For example, Magic the Gathering is some of the games that we love, and we believe those games can be further leveraged the power of decentralization mechanism, make those digital experience to permanent assets being transferred and give the users a lot of experience and value. That's what we believe in.
Got it. Fantastic. So let's jump into Cocos BCX right now, right? So can you please explain to me and break it down into simple layman's non-technical terms, right? Like what exactly is this platform that you're doing, and what do you hope to accomplish with this platform?
So the idea is to provide the minimum viable tools for the developers to provide industry level game experience. Because blockchain games emerged by the end of last year. If we take CryptoKitties as an example, it's a really good game. Before we had some number games, randomness games, but however, the reason why blockchain gaming is not popular as traditional gaming today was because the experience is not satisfactory. So right now we're building this whole like blockchain all the way up to an easy to use programming platform. Actually, we want the developers to be more easy to test out, make mistakes on our platform so the whole industry can move forward and provide more sophisticated experience to the players.
Fantastic stuff. So given your background in gaming in general, like I think it'd be really great for our viewers to sort of understand like how large the gaming industry is, right? And also too, like how big do you think it can get with blockchain implementation as well?
That's also a perfect question, because right now, according to some authoritative third-party research institute, the annual market size for digital gaming is about 130 billion US dollars per year.
Wow.
We do not believe all of them apply to blockchain mechanisms. However, there will be some offline games, such as Magic the Gathering. They have their online version, but we think their value can be further amplified by blockchains or decentralization. So we estimate the size, the potential of blockchain gaming may also reach something like 100 billion on that level a year.
Got it. Got it. And then, yeah, I think another really interesting thing too, which might be hard to quantify at this very, very moment, is just how much value is actually being unlocked, you know, and going back to your example of World of Warcraft, where if you're exchanging weapons, right, across systems, right? So can you kind of talk a little bit more about that? Because I find that an absolutely fascinating piece of all of this, right? Like the ability for me to play a game, you know, buy X, Y, and Z things, or, you know, find X rare items, and then be able to transfer them over to another game and potentially having this marketplace where I can sell those items, right? Like, talk to me a little bit about that, and sort of, you know, I guess if you can think about what is that total unlocked value at the end of the day? Because again, that's absolutely fascinating.
Well, Julia, you really ask awesome and deep questions. I can't really quantify that market, but let's try to talk about some reference or examples. I think the background about, or let's say the foundation of any item still relies on the value of the game. If we have a game with a really big worldview or a very big story, which we call a contextual narrative, we can actually develop items with really big value, and it can be transferred from series to series or even across different series. If we make a specific example, this is some example I personally really like, which is, again, Magic the Gathering. It's a very popular card game. We can see a lot of the rare cards being sold at hundreds, thousands, or even like 30,000 US dollars on eBay. So wow. If we benchmark that to the total value of Magic the Gathering, for so many years, the company has been selling a total gross revenue of almost like 6 billion, according to the data we have from the public sources. So I believe as long as the game itself has like good value potential, their in-game items would be really, really popular and valuable collectibles.
Got it. No, that was a great answer, right? So let's jump into a little bit about the token utility here, right? Because I think it's very, very clear what the value proposition is, but I would love to understand from your end, how does the Cocos token actually fit into this whole entire ecosystem? Why is it such a necessary piece of all of this?
Yes, well, in our theory, tokens are only necessary for a standalone system with its own economic paradigms and dynamics. Yep. Gaming is such kind of sector that the developers, the users, the intermediaries, and all the infrastructure providers, they run surrounding the economics of games. So under that condition or under that premises, I'm not even sure if I'm using the right word, but under that condition, there will be some medium, circulating medium or medium exchange to support all the activities, the economic activities in this system, either being developer buying some material from third-party suppliers or the user paying for the in-game consumptions. So that's the idea of having a native Cocos token to run in our system.
Got it. And just I want to clarify here too. So, hypothetically, and actually I'm really curious how you guys think about this. How do you figure out the value cross different gaming platforms, right? Because I think at the end of the day, if I was playing CSGO and I had certain skins there, and I'm looking for a particular weapon in World of Warcraft, right? So how do you figure out like what is the value if I were to switch from one to the other? And would it work in a sense that it would go from one item, it would be translated to some sort of a Cocos token value and then using it to buy the other ones? Or can you kind of explain how you think about that a little bit more?
Absolutely. We think those digital experience or like digital value translation or transfer, it also applies the real world rules. For example, some specific use case in our real life in San Francisco might not apply to the same life in Moscow. It's the same. It's the same in games. For example, if it's a game with a story of, let's say, World of Warcraft, many of the items can be transferred. It's just a matter of what the relative value in different games are.
Got it.
But think about the scenario if there is any game based on the story of Snow White, and I'm playing some Chinese game with a story or under like Three Kingdoms. It's difficult for them to build this value connection. So this is also something we look really closely into, which is we provide the tools actually for developers to build this economic connection. So users and developers can actually value and have a set of coordinates what those items are worth, instead of just, for example, describing what those tokens are. How should I program those tokens?
Got it. Okay. No, that makes complete sense here. So let's talk a little bit about go-to-market here, right? Because there's other companies that are trying to do this. I'm curious as to who you sort of consider competitors in the space, and how you guys plan on, getting the word out there and getting the most developers to sort of adopt the platform that you're building.
Yes. So first of all, we are trying to build Cocos as an open platform. We do really see many of the peers in this industry as our competitors, especially we're in a very early stage. The whole industry is in a very early stage. So right now we're trying our best to do everything we can, either from a technological point of view or from a commercial point of view, to help developers to make their first, let's just say, first stage games. For example, from technology point of view, we need to provide the technical tools. Absolutely. The system, the engine. And also from commercial, we're definitely going to help them for seed funding example, or pre-sale of tokens or pre-sale of items from a crowdfunding platform, things like such. So I think for now, we have been working with a lot of the peers, way more than competing with them. For example, Loom, LOM, is a very popular and solid game project. Actually, we have been working with them, releasing our SDK to support part of their functionalities months ago. We also, like many of the peers, are trying to do.
Got it. And then do you imagine that, the other companies that have already built on the original Cocos platform, do you think that those will be some of the early adopters to sort of implement blockchain using the Cocos BCX? Or do you imagine this more as kind of a grassroots beginning, right? So fresh games from the start, right? So I guess, is it like more of a reverse blockchain model, or are people building this from scratch? I think is an easy way to sort of consolidate that question.
Yeah, I think maybe we inherited some awareness and credit from our past experience, but we do take this as a humble experience, starting from the scratch.
Got it.
Because what we're trying to build is kind of different to graphic or other interactive features we did before. It's sort of like an economic engine. So we are all ears to listen to your advice, and we welcome any critiques and comments so we can improve ourselves to help the developers as we did years ago.
Got it. Fantastic stuff. All right. So this is another question that I've been sort of like scratching my head with. So I know that one big sort of value add is the fact that from a player perspective, I'm able to go from one item and, sort of transition it over to another game. So hypothetically, if I spend $100 on one game, I might be able to pull over $90 worth of that value to another game. So from a player's perspective, it's a very, very clear value prop for that particular instance. However, I'm curious though, from a developer's perspective, right? Like from a developer's perspective, does that actually reduce the amount of potential revenue that I could be generating from my next game that I build, because so many of the original users are actually transferring the value over, right? So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that, or is there more unlocked value for the developers that I'm not necessarily thinking about at the moment?
Well, there you have another brilliant question. Have you ever been in gaming, by the way, Julian?
I'm actually a huge gamer. My dad and I were playing Warcraft,
awesome.
StarCraft, and Diablo since I've been a child. So this was actually a really exciting interview for me to do.
Yeah, well, that's a very, very good question, because it really depends. For example, if someone is building a series with a really big history, like really big story,
Yep.
this mechanism may actually lower your cost of user acquisition and even further amplify the value of a game.
Yep.
There are so many possible or so many examples that we can borrow. It doesn't really happen, but for example,
Sure.
there are series of like shooting games, strategy games, card games, or even, for example, like Second Life, things like that.
Yep.
So some of the games, they are more adapted to this long-term value improvement. Some of the games are for like short-term experience, for example, fighting games. They're more like interactive experience. So back to your question, I think it is really up to the game challenger and also the plan of the developers if they can or they want to make it a long-term, because game eventually is a creative business. The success of every episode or every single game is kind of random. So from the very fundamental angle, all the developers want to maximize the value of their proven product. So that's actually quite aligned with the idea of an asset, which is we want to make it appreciate all the time.
Interesting. Yeah. And so actually, while you were talking, I think you brought up a really interesting point too that I'd love to have you dive in a little bit more about, is the fact that blockchain will allow for easier user acquisition. So I think in your FAQs, you actually have this really good example using Crypto Kitties and then a game that piggybacked off of Crypto Kitties called Crypto Cuddles, right? So
Yes.
I would love to have you kind of talk a little bit more about why there is such a big advantage for developers, where if you're using blockchain, you can actually acquire customers in a much faster fashion using, different games infrastructure that's already out there.
Yeah. So again, essentially, if we talk about a very essential aspect of this problem, users, they spend money, time, and their behavioral data in exchange of some items or titles. So basically, if those valuables can be transferred among different things, of course, with certain conditions, that's eventually they will feel that, and that lowers the barrier of the entry for them to go into any new games. So if we talk about the principle, that's the idea. But again, it takes a lot of work for the developers to actually make that transition smooth.
Got it. Got it. Okay, fantastic stuff here. And so let's talk about progress now, right? So you guys have had some really, really incredible backers. I know that it was an old post, but I was reading it for the first time where, Binance, Neo Global Capitals, 500 startups were some of the investors that you guys listed. But how far along are you guys with Cocos BCX now? Talk to me about developers that are currently using your platform to build, just all that sort of good stuff that you're willing to share with the viewers.
Yeah, so we started in November last year, released our demo in March this year, and 2 months ago on this big gaming event called China Joy, so we released our alpha test, including the blockchain, the software engine, and also the IDE. Right now, we are invitation only with more than 10 institutional developers trying out on our platform. So we expect to see some beta tests in Q4 this year and commercial release in the first half of next year.
Got it. Fantastic stuff. And so tell me a little bit about what you're most excited about, right? Because I think as a co-founder, we always have a very glorified ultimate vision, right? So what are you most excited about when building this Cocos BCX platform?
It's basically seeing the future. If I'm not sure if you're a fan of or if you have ever watched this movie called Player Number One.
It's on my to watch list.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna tell you any story about that. But yeah, we think that's possibly something like in the future, which is that we have spent great resources in digital world. Yep. So if we play any part to help the evolution of that, we're really, really excited. Other than that, still, we try to be really humble. And this is not the first time we have been trying to start a project. So yeah, I think a long way to go. And yeah, again, we are here to listen to all the guidance and advice from all of you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to check out Ready Player One. So Richard, before we actually sign off here, I would love to know what your favorite games are. Currently, in the past, what have you spent the most money on? Like,
well, actually, I don't have much time to play games now. But I think the game I spent the most time on was Diablo 2.
Okay.
So you can guess my age. I'm pretty old. So another thing is, I think the game I spent the most money on was a Magic the Gathering online version.
Oh,
and
interesting.
Yeah, by that I actually figured out some of the issues because it's an awesome game. But it's not as attractive as their offline version because the collectibles in that game is not that satisfactory, because I don't even know if it's limited supply.
Yep. What kind of a deck did you have? I remember I used to have a Swarm Elf Troll deck or Goblin deck.
I'm pretty much like that.
You are?
Some of everything. I mean, like, I'm really not a specialist.
It's the Blitzkrieg, right? Like that's what I used to play back in the day. Fantastic. Well, Richard, this has been absolutely incredible. Before we sign off here, is there anything else that you would like to share with our viewers before we go?
Well, actually, I want to thank all the supporters of Cocos, because I'm not part of the Cocos team, but I'm honored to be joining this journey. So again, we're all ears to your advice, and we welcome you joining us in all the way so we can move the industry forward.
Fantastic. Yep. I think at the end of the day, whenever there's a new technology that's being introduced, gaming is sort of one of the very, very first layers to push true consumer adoption, right? And, as you know, I think there's a lot of questions that are out there now, whether or not, these protocols actually have true utility. And so I think a lot of them are seeing issues with getting adoption. Whereas with the gaming component, when you guys are successful, I think that you guys are going to really, really help usher in, the blockchain future, right? And if done correctly, people should actually have no idea that there is any blockchain involved at the end of the day. And it's just a truly seamless end-to-end sort of interaction.
Well, that's the time we got something bigger than ourselves. Again, this is bigger than Cocos. So yeah, let's do that.
Absolutely. Well, Richard, again, it was an absolute pleasure to have you here on the Blockchain Brief. Thank you so very much for your time. We're really looking forward to tracking the progress of your project.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julian. I'm honored again to be here.